Uh, okay. This is the list, the complete list of the people coming to speak at Venbounder. So sign the date and visit the website to have more information. We will very happy to have you in Madrid, which is also a wonderful city, not just for coming to the conference. Um, International SEO, lessons from the trench. Uh, I always say that really like international SEO because it's really funny. It's really fascinating. For instance, you can learn doing international SEO what scientists do in Antarctica during austral winter, because uh, you are used as an international SEO to start digging from where your traffic is coming. And for a client of mine, I discovered that these almost 120 people were coming from Antarctica. Surely they were scientists blocked by some winter storm in the South Pole. However, as the same John Muir reminded and underlined a few weeks ago, he was saying hreflang is one of the most complex aspects of SEO, if not the most complex. I would say that international SEO in general is maybe uh, one of the most difficult and complicated vertical of SEO. It usually is undertaken uh, because people usually thinks about uh, more complex technical stuff like mobile, PWA, AMP, all this kind of stuff which are strong, or even let's say uh, JavaScript framework and so on. So these are really difficult from a technical point of view. But if we look to the overall meaning of SEO also as a marketing channel, probably international SEO is surely very difficult. So uh, I didn't want to prepare the classic presentation where I say you have to do this. So I'm going, let's say, backwards from the classic stuff. So the basic and of international SEO from a technical point of view, then going back to, in order to make you understand how you should really work international SEO. So let's start with a refresher lesson, which is the classic thing. We all know that we have or multi-country or multilingual. When it comes to multi-country, we have three choices, which is the country code domain name, the .it above here, when we can choose the subfolder /it/ for instance, or the subdomain it.domain.com. Uh, no one of these is the best one. Usually, you have to choose your international SEO structure in terms of which kind of solution between the three to choose, depending on your personal situation, your business situation. I mean, for instance, it's clear that sometimes you have to straight go to a .it, for instance, a country code domain name, because you are obligated. Because, I mean, you are an SEO, but above you, you have a commercial team, a board of directors, and maybe they decide that the brand is going to have a new name, a different name from the original one. So because of branding, it cannot be in a subdomain or it cannot be in a subfolder. On the other hand, sometimes even if we usually say that subdomain is the less favorite one, but sometimes you really need to have to work with a subdomain because maybe you are working with a really complex website where you cannot really duplicate everything inside the subfolder of your main version. So again, every situation, everything you're choosing is as its advantages and its disadvantages. So don't think only in terms of SEO advantages, think in terms of what is better in terms of SEO for the main purposes of this internationalization we are going to do. And the same thing is for multilingual. Um, One of the biggest mistake, which is quite stupid. I mean, it's really obvious if you think, but it's really common because clients obviously they don't know SEO. Is when you are having clients who have a country code domain name. They did multilingual, and then they decide to start targeting countries with the same country code. So we all know that country code is not very ideal for multilingual because it's geo-targeting your domain on, well, let's say, Italian, Spain, France, depending on the country code domain name. And the hreflang. The hreflang, we know it can be in multilingual and multi-country, and with a default. The default is somehow a mystery, and it's somehow really outdated. Everything Google has presented in its help page, because Google is saying that you should use only for the splash pages where you can choose, let's say, which version you want to see, or to eventually use it in home page when you are doing the right direction because of IP detection or user browser detection. And we know instead that we can use the default not only for this kind of pages, we can use it for every kind of pages when we want to target all those people that we are not targeting with a specific language. It's easier, however, to tell what not to do with the hreflang. We know that the hreflang is composed by several elements. One of the elements are the one or two codes, ISO code, the language and the country code. And even if it's really, at least for me, quite easy to understand that you have a language code and a country code, and that when you use them both together, you have to follow the language plus country. You can find every kind of combination used in the website. So you can see people using the wrong country ISO code, people using the incorrect language ISO code, people using only the country ISO code, and people even inverting the order of the ISO codes. All these kind of 4 mistakes are enough for making the hreflang useless. And Google is quite precise. It says that if I find a wrong annotation, hreflang annotation, I won't take care of it. I wouldn't consider it. So pay attention to this kind of distraction. There are also more serious issues that we can find, like not using the self-referential hreflang notation, which is a quite common mistake. Also because there is, I don't know why, there is people that is claiming that you can get rid of it when it's clear that Google is claiming in every official documentation that it is needed. Then, the classic one, creating conflict between the hreflang and the canonical. I mean, in the 99.99% of the case, the URL that we are indicating in the hreflang must be a canonical. This is also something that John Mueller declared in a very, very long and famous and retweet and share Google Plus post. So, other mistake that I'm used to find, pay attention. That's why I usually say that before doing international SEO, clean everything you have wrong in your website, because if you have problems affecting your website, generically, not just thinking about international SEO, when you are going to create international version, you are going to replicate, and these problems are going to boost and destroy all the performance of your site. These are classic mistakes. If you are using URL in the hreflang that are pointing to 301, 302, or to 404, 410, or hreflang which are blocked by in the robot text, or these first three mistakes usually are going to give you the classic no return error message in Google Search Console. When there is this fourth situation, the hreflang URL is relative, not absolute. This is not a real mistake, because Google says, yeah, yes, you can use relative URLs in the hreflang, but it's better if you use absolute ones, because you have to put eventually, like in the canonical case, rare canonical case, you have to indicate in the head HTML of your page what is the base of your relative URL, and sometimes people forget it, which is so. In order to not fall into mistakes because of miscommunication with the developers, always better to use the absolute URLs. And citing Aleda, Aleda is going to come out quite frank, at least another 2 times in my presentation, because she wrote so much and so fantastic content about international SEO. Aleda, when it comes out of the official announcement of mobile first indexing, came out with this schema for implementing hreflang in a mobile first situation for independent mobile website. And pay attention that this schema is substantially identical to the one that you should implement in the AMP website right now. It's the same. So you can use it for implementing hreflang if you have an m.domain.com website, but also in your AMP version of your mobile website. But as I was saying, usually people really stop and overthink about the technical side of international SEO. I mean, it's really important to understand it, to recognize the mistakes, but it's maybe not the first thing we have to do, at least if we are not, when we are starting to internationalizing a website. If we are doing auditing, obviously, you have to check all this stuff. But over-concentrate yourself about how to use the hreflang and blah, blah, blah is usually before you have not correctly decided which is the strategy. And the strategy is to start from business always. What market we have to target? And then, depending on the market, depending on the numbers these markets are giving to you, what structure is better for us? And when we have decided the structure and solve all the technical stuff, let's do what is the message we want to give to these different markets. So the bigger theme topic of the localization. I'm really want to underline the importance of localization, not just because, let's say, it's important, obviously, but because we know how hard it is to make understand our stakeholders, our clients, that we must localize content, especially when we are targeting with the same language different markets. For instance, English, British English, American English, Canadian English, Australian English, and blah, blah, blah. We usually end up cloning the American website for all these markets. And this can be also a big problem in terms of duplicated content. because what happens many times may happen that Google will false up all these duplicated version and choose just one, even if the actual lang will work perfectly. So sometimes you can see something that you can see usually in the cache version of your pages. You can see that Google is correctly showing the URL that you were indicating with the hreflang, but it's showing the content that supposedly is for another market than the one targeted by the URL. So business, what market must be targeted? This is, I'm taking example, well, as I was saying to you, I was going to cite Aleida quite a lot. This is an example that Aleida presented in one presentation about international SEO, and she was saying why we are targeting for this country, in this case, in her case was Spain, also the English language. This is a good question. And at first you can say, why in Italy you are targeting also the English language? Because MoneyGram is usually used by immigrants. And immigrants not necessarily know the language of the country, especially when the language is Italian, or don't know it really well. So it is better for MoneyGram to offer them the opportunity to use the language, to use the site in a language that they may understand better, which is in this case is English. So it may have a sense, for instance, in this case, to target a non-Italian speaking user in Italy for MoneyGram. So don't go always with the obvious answer. Sometimes there are patterns, there are things that you must think a little more. Obviously, what language do speak our user? Because maybe we have a website, multilingual usually, and we can understand from where they are coming and the amount of traffic and other data, if we can start thinking about moving from a multilingual strategy to a multi-country strategy. This is a good example. El Corte Inglés, which is a mall chain here in Spain and present also in Portugal, is receiving quite interesting. It's interesting traffic. Especially it's really well positioned ranking in the USA, and also with facial snippet and video and blah blah blah. Why? Because we have in the USA we have at least, I think they are almost 49 or 55 million people speaking Spanish. So why it could be, this is just a theory and an exercise to show you, it could be interesting maybe for the Corte Inglés to start thinking, hey, why don't we do only we are not going to target also the American language, the Spanish-speaking American residents, because we are already targeting, they have already this visibility. This is usually the classic situation, for instance, the newspaper online that are targeting Spain finally decide to create a version for Latin America because they saw this opportunity, and for a newspaper online it's a big opportunity because of our depression and blah, blah, blah. So they decide to create a version for Latin America. Obviously, let's say that we are Zillow and want to enter in the Italian in the Spanish real estate market. We need to know who are our competitors and how we are doing. And we need to start seeing what are their weak points and their strong points. And when we have all this information, we can start really thinking if it's the case of investing our time and our money in internationalization. This is especially when you have a client which is trying to is pitching you and telling you, okay, We want to go international. We want to target these. It may have obviously is reason, but if you have the data, you can try to make him rethink and maybe not to go straight with dozens of different version targeting dozens of countries, but with a more persuaded development for your internationalization. So you can finally say, okay, we have this kind of metrics, we are positive, let's go. We are not so positive, so we are going to wait time, uh, waste time, waste money, go slower for the ones that really matters. Let's hold on and wait. But even in all this, if we really do not understand which is the business model of our company, of our clients, probably we are going to make some mistakes. So let's see two cases where this was really the things that I needed to understand in order to find a solution to propose to my clients. Here I choose the the shining twins, and I mean, it's really poignant this image because really this site was duplicated 277 times. Because why? It says our website targets all the nations that are members of a United Nations. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. I mean, you can see it was targeting South Sudan, it was targeting Curacao, St. Martin. The most exciting, surprising one was South Georgia, which is a bunch of islands lost in close to the Antarctica, and where only 30 British soldiers are living. And this site was targeting that piece of land. Moreover, we targeted all the scripting variation of the most important languages. This is not incorrect. I mean, if you have a website, a Chinese website, which offers the content both in traditional and simplified Chinese, you have to indicate it. So you can use this kind of scripting ISO code with ZH and ZH. But was this really needed for this website? Was something that I needed to understand. And why the client did all this mess? Because his business were totally depending from the location of his warehouse. It is an e-commerce website, and obviously he need to distribute his products, and he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 warehouses serving a precise geography. So this was going to make everything more complicated. He resolved it with creating 30 plus domain names, many of them duplicated, and many of them having not only the language, the main language of a targeted market, but also a neutral English version. And obviously, even if he had, even if he has a warehouse in Japan, that warehouse was also serving other countries close to Japan. The problem was that we had gigantic duplicate issues, and the hreflang was really complex. The hreflang was something like 382 lines of code in the head. This was the situation. So, like the guys of Apollo 14, we should need to be creative in order to find a solution to this disaster. So, obviously, we needed to maintain the domain corresponding to the warehouses, which are the .com for USA, the Canadian one, the Mexican one, Brazilian one, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and this is sometimes something that I really don't understand. People try to choose from multilingual and multi-country. A website can be both. In fact, this is something that even Google is suggesting. When you have too many, you are targeting too many countries, or you need to target too many countries, maybe the ideal is to prioritize the most important markets with the specific version, and then going multilingual. Also in terms of site structure, and also in the terms of hreflang annotation. So choosing this sort of mixed architecture was meaning that we needed to prune off all the useless website. And then again, it's coming out the X default. Using the European English version for the X default version, and also was the ideal in this case, because the European warehouse was also not only was serving all Europe, and the client wasn't targeting all the languages present in our old continent, but also it was targeting all the African continent with a European warehouse. So it was easy, for instance, to use English for targeting all these countries that we were not targeting with their own language, like Romania, or let's say Greeks, or Bulgarian, or other languages. Instead, for all the other, for a very similar reasoning, the client was using the Spanish for Spain version as the general language, also for targeting Latin America. Then decided to create as many country subfolder targeting each Latin American market. So the idea here is create just one version, multilingual, and use it as the ES default version for all the Latin American Spanish-speaking country, and then have your Spanish version for Spain, because you have a euros, because it is a different kind of Spain, and for many other reasons. This is something that is coming out really usually, very frequently, when you are having this sort of situation where even if you are really well crafting the hreflang architecture, usually there is always be the possibility that people is coming, not really, Google is not really showing the kind of a URL you really want to. So also for usability, it's really good idea to prepare this kind of alert based on IP detection in order to suggest your user that maybe there is a better version for them. In this case, was necessary because, let's say, if an American guy was coming to the European version, I mean, he couldn't buy anything because the warehouse was not serving his market. But as I say here, no IP fencing. So the first time the guy lands, show his alert, but never oblige him to stay, to be redirected to his USA version. Again, simplifying. This is when we talk about pruning in international SEO, is somehow one of the most common tasks. The site was having a German for Germany and the German for Austria version, which were totally identical. So why create just one German version? Then eliminate all the useless hreflang annotation, and then go to redesign and we decide to move to the sitemap implementation of the hreflang. When we talk about sitemap implementation, remember always that sitemaps has a limitation in terms of quantity of data you can put inside a sitemap. So maybe it's also good moment for rethinking how you are organizing all the sitemaps of your website. And so to use them also as a way to monitor how your website is indexed. And this one is the greedy. It's a kind of client that is really more common than you think. And you are going to understand it. The client is an important international luxury resort chain. At the starting situation, as I told you before, you're usually seeing situation where, okay, there is a multilingual website or is a multi-country website. This guy was both, but in a tricky way. It was both because it was apparently multilingual, but the content was changing dynamically over the base of the IP of the user. So we had all the same URLs, but the content was changing because of the IP detection. So we had 7 targeted languages. Moreover, this dynamic content management was organized with groups of IPs. So for instance, in North America, it was not just changing the content only for the USA. It was changing the content for the group of states like English, like USA and Canada. So it was considered with pairing 2 different kind of IPs, or certain countries of Latin America was paired to the Mexican one. What was the reason of this disaster? So the main preoccupation, the main worries that you have to consider and you have to try to satisfy, the client didn't want the user to do and doing dumping. What is dumping? Dumping is when I'm in Europe, I land on a website which has a Spanish version with Spanish price, but there's also, for instance, a Mexican version with Mexican price. So the client don't want that I from Mexico, from Spain, buy something with Mexican value, which is going to be really more cheaper for me and a loss for the client, for a business. But this methodology that the client was using was resulting in these 2 things. The first result was Google was indexing only the language version visible from the USA IP. And obviously, if it was indexing all the results corresponding to the US IP, all the other users not from the USA was clicking and thinking to land on a page which was presenting a specific offer, but wasn't seeing that offer. So the bounce rate and the frustration of a non-USA visitor was really, really frustrated. So what to do? How can we do this kind of to help a client solving the problem with dumping, following the best practices of international SEO? Should we hope that Google is able to index the dynamic content because sometimes Googlebot comes from outside the USA? Better don't cheat ourselves. It's true that sometimes Googlebot comes from other IPs which are not Mountain View, but it's random and maybe it's coming from a country which is not the country you want Googlebot to come. So, I mean, also if Google is alerting us in red, but we continue to support and recommend using separate located URL configuration and annotating them with hreflang, maybe this methodology is not the one we need to use for international SEO. So, what to do? What are the contents in which geotargeting really matters for this kind of website? surely only the transactional one. I say the direct and the related one. I mean, with the related, I was considering all those landing pages that are not doesn't have a direct transactional meaning, but are the starting point of a transaction. All the other pages, like the guides, like description of your hotel, like the blog and blah blah blah, where because we can treat them as multilingual. Again, business first. Which languages are spoken in the targeted markets? For a tourist side, like in this specific niche, which is luxury resource, we must pay attention which are the languages spoken not only by the locals, but also by the tourists in the country. Because, for instance, if you go here to the Mexico row, you can see that in Mexico, only 66% of the traffic from Mexico was in Spanish. 24% was in English. Why? This is because, and I investigated a little bit, because many times American and Canadian usually visiting Mexico then decide on the go where to go as a resort. Maybe we are doing a tour, we are traveling, and then decide, okay, let's find a way to a place where to rest. And so we are doing a search from an IP, Mexican IP. So pay attention also because, for instance, another reason was, okay, we are in a resort. The resort usually presents and offers to clients that are already hosted in the resort some upgrades. And the people usually what to do? Okay, I'm going to think it, let's go visit the website. So it can be also a target having a language, for instance, in this case, English, in the Mexican version, could be a really interesting way to target and do upselling with the clients. Again, when we are thinking about this, let's check if we are missing opportunities. It's really easy to understand with Google Analytics. For instance, this client who was targeting all the word with the Mexican Spanish version, maybe should have needed to start thinking in markets like the Argentinian one, because quite many conversion was coming from Argentina, and surely a quite bunch of money. So we decide to change the site architecture so that all the transactional content could be geo-targeted, which was meaning creating subfolders and US, SES, MEX, and so on. Using the N multilingual and N multi-country version as the X default for all targeting all the countries we were not targeted with the language, and making the generic ES US version as the Spanish version. And it was targeting also Russian, and I mean Russia, we all know that the main search engine is Yandex, so maybe in this case is one of the cases that going with a country code domain name is the best way to do. And obviously quitting the right direction and the fencing. This was the solution we had with hreflang. And okay, and the client say, okay, how do you solve the dumping? The answer is quite surprising, because we are SEO, we always try to think in SEO solution. But sometimes the solution is not in SEO, but in software. It's really easy. With a booking engine, you can make it possible for a Spanish to buy a Mexican offer. So sometimes the real solution to this kind of problem, which are really common also in e-commerce, is in the shop, how you call it, in the process of making the boat. In this case, it's the booking engine. It can be the shop chart in the e-commerce. Why I have to do all this question? Because Only if we do this, ask this question to ourselves and to our client, we can identify the priority, we can identify the waste, and you saw how many waste these sites had, and we can find the opportunity. And we can especially find the origins of all the problems and don't try to invent the wheel. And knowing the origin of a problem, we can solve them more easily. And especially, we are not going to make our client angry because we are respecting his business strategy. We are not pretending to be his CEO. Okay, question if we have time.